Good morning, everybody. It's Jeff Goldberg for the Sales Pro Network, broadcasting on Friday at 10 a.m. from Long Island, New York, as I always do. Welcome, everyone. I hate to sound repetitious, but I'm very excited about today's guest, as I always am. As you know, I founded the Sales Pro Network to be a place where salespeople can come share their sales challenges, their success stories, get great coaching from people like myself and today's guest and many other experts who have visited us and are part of the network. It's a place where every Friday we do a Facebook Live with great guests, and today's is no exception. You're going to be incredibly impressed with his background and the things he has to say. I know I had a great conversation with him when we first met. I'm pleased to introduce you to international speaker, consultant, change management expert, and I can't wait to ask him about this, aspiring warrior monk, Shawn Rhodes. Good morning, Shawn.
It's a pleasure, Jeff. Thanks for having me on.
It's a real pleasure. I'm going to jump right in if you don't mind, because I've got 2 pages of questions and we'll probably only be able to get to a few. But first of all, your company is Shawns Consulting, and I believe that's from Zen Buddhism, right? What does Shoshin mean?
Shoshin means beginner's mind. And the reason that I named my company that is I have a deep affinity for Asian culture. I've been practicing the martial arts both in the US and in Japan for over 2 decades. And I've been able to travel to more than 24 countries. I made sure that some of those were in the Far East. The reason that it applies so much to my company is that I always wanted to keep an open mind in every situation of what I could be learning that was new. And we'll talk about how to apply that to our sales processes today. But I also wanted to make sure that I was bringing that message into my clients' companies as well. So many executives and even senior salespeople get locked into one way of doing things while the world continues to change around them. And of course, that doesn't help our sales results. So making sure to keep an open mind and continuously learn and improve, that's what Shoshin is all about.
Kind of seeing things with baby eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And I didn't write this one down, but how has the martial arts affected your speaking business, your consulting business, and your sales?
It definitely allows me to take what I learn on the mat, on the dojo mat, where we're tossing each other around. Aikido has been the art that I've really been practicing the longest. Just got my black belt back in November before COVID shut the world down. And so with Aikido, with Judo, with those types of arts, it's all about not meeting force with force, but rather how do we redirect energy? And in a sales conversation, and especially with objections, this is so important because the worst thing we can do when a client gives us an objection is tell them that they're wrong. The best thing we can do is to say, I totally understand why you would think that. Love to hear more about your experiences that would lead you to believe that's the case, and to kind of align with them and then slowly begin to turn the ship, turn the conversation back in the direction that we need it to go. And the martial arts have definitely taught me how to practice that because training with people that outweigh me by twice my body weight, force with force doesn't work, but just by turning and moving in the direction that they're going allows me to chuck them multiple feet in the air. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that thought that you just gave us about objections. And even just the word objections is almost offensive. If you look it up in the dictionary, almost every definition ends with something in opposition. And
right.
what that sounds like to me is we're setting ourselves up to oppose the prospect. And my feeling is, and I always tell my coaching clients, you can't win a fight with a prospect. They're either going to give you the appointment or not. They're either going to choose to do business with you or not, but fighting with them doesn't make sense. And I love the way you expressed it. I always suggest we really need to put our arms around them and say, I completely understand why you might think that, and then have a conversation with them that hopefully gets them to see that doing business with us is a good idea. Does that sound right to you?
Absolutely right. Yes, sir.
So could you just share, I actually forgot, I usually start with this, a little bit about your background because it is fascinating. I'm going to let you tell everybody.
Okay, sure. So I had, as most salespeople will tell you, a very untraditional path into the world of sales. Where it started for me was not in the boardroom, but actually on the battlefield. And I was, as a young man, trying to figure out my way in life, had no work ethic, was definitely not suited for a position like a sales position where we're largely left to our own devices. We have to manage our own time, our own energy, our own resources. I would have failed at that miserably if I'd have started in sales back in my teens or 20s, which is where I know most salespeople tend to get their start at. So to get that knowledge, to get that work ethic, instead, I actually started my journey with the U.S. Marine Corps. Now, they took one look at me and said, dude, you're not going to survive as an infantryman, so it would not be a good idea for us to put you there. Well, I said, great, I still want to be a U.S. Marine. What other options do you have for me? and they looked at my ASVAB scores. And the ASVAB is a test they give to all the high school kids in America now to kind of, see where in the military might you be a good fit. I failed everything except for verbal comprehension, because I love to talk, I love to communicate, which are both great skills for salespeople, come to find out. And they said, all right, we've got a job for you. So they put me in charge of what they called public relations, crisis communication, and my job title in the Marine Corps was a war correspondent. So instead of just having a rifle, I also had a rifle and a camera and a notebook. And like a salesperson's given a lot of autonomy, they gave me a lot of autonomy to travel around battlefields all over the world. Wherever Marines were fighting, that's where I could be sent. And my job was to study these Marines, study best practices, study how they were able to pivot in situations like in sales where, hey, failure is not an option. We're either going to make this work or we're not going home. So a lot of salespeople end up in that mentality. Well, it showed me that, and we'll talk about this today, I'm sure, that these teams were able to continuously learn and improve in very stressful environments, like a sales call. And they were able to do that in ways that allowed them to not use hope as their sales strategy. And that really impressed me to the point where I began taking that into organizations, into Fortune 100 companies, and into sales teams, and helping them understand the way we're going to market right now is hoping we remember what we learned on Jeff's podcast. We're going to market hoping what we learned in that last sales book is going to come into play. Hope doesn't work very well as a sales strategy. And so what we're teaching organizations now is how to rely on systems, how to rely on process in order to get more certainty in how we sell.
So why do you think that salespeople do rely on hope as a strategy?
Well, ultimately, they've been given no other way. I mean, think about as a salesperson, whether you're given training or not, ultimately, you do have to go out there and figure it out on your own. So many salespeople are, they're given the training, they're given the onboarding. Some companies even invest weeks or months into training their salespeople, but then they're left to go use the training. Well, that means they have to continue to learn lessons the hard way, because training, if it's not constantly updated, is by definition out of date very quickly. And a lot of salespeople are learning this the hard way, especially in the midst of COVID-19, where we're getting 2019's training on top of a world that's drastically changed. So we have to go out and learn, okay, how do we adapt what we know into this new world? Unfortunately, we have to make a lot of mistakes along the way to learn those lessons. And that's a lot of lost sales, a lot of lost revenue for our companies, and a lot of lost commission for the salespeople.
You said something that rings so true for me. I actually tell my training prospects, I'm really focused these days on one-on-one and small group coaching, but I'm best known as a trainer, and I've worked with probably some of the companies that you've worked with. I've worked with companies like Cisco and Siemens and Citibank and Aramark, and I've done it internationally. But I actually tell them when we're in the sales process, look, if you hire me to be a trainer, you're hiring one of the best. There are very few people who are better than me at training salespeople, but the only thing you're doing when you hire me to train your salespeople is you're paying my mortgage. And I appreciate that, but you're really going to get value if you reinforce that training, whether you pay me to do it or your team does it, but somebody's got to reinforce it constantly, because training without reinforcement simply does not work. It's a great day. I've got a background in theater and stand-up comedy. I'm highly entertaining, and I have a lot of fun with audiences, but we once stopped and figured it out. I have many programs, like I'm sure you do. One of them is called professional prospecting. How do you get appointments with decision makers? And we one time figured out and counted it. There's 132 different things you're going to learn in 1 8-hour day with me. You can't possibly remember and implement 132 things immediately or even over time without that constant reinforcement. So I'm with you 1,000,000%. So I'm curious now, what was the turning point for you when you stopped using hope and you started implementing systems?
When I opened my own business in 2013, I didn't know the difference between an LLC and an S corp. And my role, my little shingle that I hung out was as a business consultant. So I was that guy that we all laugh at. It's like, oh, you think you're going to make it in this world? That's funny. And I had to learn very quickly, when the revenue wasn't coming in, but the bills were regularly due, I had to begin doing something differently in order to generate clients, in order to generate revenue, and ultimately provide the value that I had to give. So I had to look at everything that I was doing, because I was scattershot like a lot of salespeople. We'll try LinkedIn for a while, and we'll try making some phone calls, and we'll try sending some emails or a lot of emails. We'll try all these different things. And when business does come in, few of us have ways to track that back to what actually worked. So I had to begin implementing some kind of a system. And Michael Gerber, in his great book, The E-Myth, he gives business people a piece of advice. He says, if you're going to scale your company, you have to pretend that your company today needs to be the prototype for 5,000 others just like it. And as salespeople, that could apply to us as well. If we were going to franchise you as a salesperson, create or replicate 5,000 of you, how would we begin to build a prototype for that? And that starts and ends with systems. Just like a McDonald's franchise can stand up a new McDonald's location, the franchise owner never flipped a burger in his life, and yet it's profitable within a couple of weeks. Why is that possible? Systems, processes. And so I began to use systems and processes in my sales in the same way that I'd seen those teams use it across the world, high performing teams in the military and in business, that I was able to actually go in and study how they were able to pivot in these really rapidly changing environments, and began to realize that, hey, training's great. It's very useful. But as you mentioned, if we don't have some way to make sure that it is continuously updated and continuously implemented, as we all know, we have to measure what we want to actually achieve results in, then it's not going to achieve the result that we're after. So when I began actually using systems, processes, and rapidly innovating and replicating them and iterating them in my own business, results just began to skyrocket. Bringing that message into the world of clients through the keynotes and through the workshops and training and consulting that I'm able to do now, people are seeing similar results. That hope doesn't have to be our strategy anymore.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you were a Marine. Hoorah!
Hoorah.
And I know there's no such thing as an ex-Marine. You're always a Marine.
Right.
Now, you said you weren't an infantry. We don't call them infantry person, right? Infantryman. And did you still have to go through the same basic training that any Marine does?
That's right. Yep. 12 weeks at Paris Island, basic combat training, which is slightly different than the training they give infantrymen and women these days. It's a dual gender occupational specialty now. But when I was embedded in these infantry units with scout snipers, with engineers, with artillerymen, with infantry people, I had to perform same job they were doing right alongside them. If they were kicking down doors and clearing houses, they don't have room for dead weight. So I had to get really quickly trained and spun up on how to be minimally viable in their world, so that I could not only do my job of capturing what was happening for a historical record and for news articles and publications, but also to make sure that I didn't do anything to get in the way of those teams coming back alive, which was a constant, iterative process for sure.
Yeah, and that's a very good thing. You certainly want to come out of it alive.
Yeah.
I watched your TED Talk, which I think everybody should watch. If you guys don't know what TED Talks are, just Google it right now. They're brilliant, never more than 18 minutes, and it's always with a world-class expert in an amazing array of subjects. Just Google TED Talks, and I watched yours, and I thought it was just terrific and inspirational. Your experience in the Marines helped you to see that trust is crucial. And how does that relate to salespeople and sales organizations?
So a couple of different ways. You have the internal trust within a sales team, and we're happy to dig into how we can definitely improve that very quickly. And then there's the trust that we have with our prospects and the trust we have with our clients. So three different areas. Now, the internal trust on a sales team is usually non-existent unless there's some kind of a friendship between those salespeople. Because often salespeople are competing in one company for the same group of clients in the same geography. And so it makes a lot of sense that we would keep everything pretty close to the chest. Well, these teams that I studied, they couldn't operate like that, even though they were all responsible for targeting the same goals in the same area. They had to share what was working and what wasn't, because they understood that it wasn't about who was right, it was about what was right. And for us as salespeople, yes, commissions are important. Yes, revenue is crucial, but it's really about serving our clients. And so if you and I are on the same sales team and I learned something targeting a prospect or reaching out or scheduling a meeting that I think could help you, it's incumbent upon me to share that so that we both can be more successful. Because as you learn something, I want that channel of communication to be open to me as well. So that's how we can improve trust on individual sales teams. Now, as far as trust between ourselves as salespeople and our prospects, these are people that aren't clients yet. There's a lot of different ways that we can build integrity, whether our client picks up the phone or answers an email or not. And that's simply telling them, here's what I did before, following up on that email, that phone call. Here's why I'm reaching out now, adding a piece of value into your life, whether that's a link to a white paper, a recording, a live cast I saw. And here's what I'm going to do next. Be reaching out next week again via email, via phone, via LinkedIn. And if you begin to build those kind of continuous improvement communication channels where it's, hey, this is what I'm going to do and when I'm going to do it, and you deliver on that, you're doing something most salespeople never take the time to do, which is establish integrity. And of course, the first thing we want to do with anybody that sells to us is know that I can trust them. So by doing that, even with voicemail messages, allows us to build more trust with our prospects. On the client side, Well, that comes from not just selling something to a client and then handing them off to a customer service or a delivery team. It's continuing to follow up. How's that product or service working out for you? Not only to gather referrals, but to gather testimonials and to make sure that the life cycle of that client doesn't end with that one sell.
Yeah, that's great. That's proving that you're going to deliver what you say you're going to deliver is crucial. In fact, I always advise people you want to under promise and over deliver because that helps to build trust too. I recently bought an exercise bike. And I just thought this was brilliant. Not that I bought the bike, although that was a smart idea.
Sure.
But when I ordered it, I got a confirmation via email saying it would arrive in 2 weeks, which I was very excited about because some of the competitor models were running 12 and 16 weeks. So I was like, yeah, 2 weeks, I'm going to get my bike because I don't know about you. I really love immediate gratification. I would have rather had it delivered. I'd rather it had been delivered by a drone an hour later, but 2 weeks seemed pretty reasonable. But here's the great thing. It showed up a week later instead of 2 weeks later. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited. This is an awesome company. Now, I'm betting that the Schwinn company absolutely positively knew they could deliver that bike to me in 2 weeks, in 1 week. But they set up my expectation for two. And then I was stunningly amazed and thrilled. And I just told that story to you and a bunch of people, and I've shared it on Facebook already. And that's a great way to engender trust and prove to people that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, which so many people don't do. The salespeople are often guilty of over-promising and under-delivering, and that's a horrible way to establish trust and a great way to break it. You also talk about mission being important. I really did watch that TED Talk. Why is mission so important, and what mission should salespeople be on?
So there's two different types of missions that salespeople are usually familiar with. There's the mission like I've got a meat mission this month, all right, and that comes really out of the world of recruiting. You know, I've got to fill so many bodies, so I'm not sitting on a donut at the end of the month for whatever I'm trying to do with my sales. And then there's the other side of the mission, which is the value that I'm here to deliver, the value that my company is here to deliver. And so many salespeople will spend so much time in the sales process talking about features or talking about the history of their product or service or how many square feet it fits inside of a floor space, all these kind of metrics and things that they're given with their product sheets. Well, I've figured out, because we track results religiously in my own company, more than 8,000 tracked phone calls and what worked and what didn't across those phone calls. We discovered that clients were more interested in achieving their results. They were less interested in hearing about the background of me, my company, my product or service, background of my salespeople, how many square feet my widget took up in their showroom, all the things that you could normally sell on. So what that taught us to do was to really help organizations define what is the value that we provide in the lives of our clients. Not just if it's a soft service like HR services, for instance, not just better employee engagement, not just better customer retention, but the results of those things. And if we can talk to that in terms of how we can specifically help our clients achieve what they're after, suddenly we're not commodities anymore. Suddenly we've differentiated ourselves in ways that no other salesperson's attempting to do in our market. And by doing that in ways that we can then fractal out to the rest of our sales team, we can eliminate competition right out of the gate because clients are always more interested in their results than in the results you think they need.
Yeah, I call that showing up and throwing up. Hi, I'm Jeff Goldberg from Jeff Goldberg Associates. Let me tell you all about why we're the greatest coaching and training firm in the world. You can watch as their eyes glaze over, and they not literally, but they figuratively leave the room. They don't want to hear about that. Look, prospects care about one thing, and you may not be old enough to have heard this one, but it's called the WIFM. W-I-F-M.
Oh, yeah, I know about the WIFM. Zig Ziglar, man. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, there you go. What's in it for me? And that's what every prospect's thinking about. So certainly we're going to mention our history and what we do, but they're more interested in how are you going to help me solve my problem? How are you going to help me do what I'm trying to do better? That's really all they care about. And you're also really touching on the difference between features and benefits. We're certainly going to talk about the features of what we have to offer, but if we don't tie every feature to its corresponding benefit, you walk out and you go, wow, I just gave the greatest presentation in my life. Why didn't that deal close? What happened? It's because the prospect didn't see the value or the benefit. I was also fascinated when you started talking about mirror neurons and how they affect us. Could you talk a little bit about what they are and why that might be useful in sales?
So mirror neurons is a scientific fact that happens when we see something that triggers us, and it could be a positive or a negative trigger. And you know, I'm the first person to stand up against people being triggered in society. You know, because of my background as a Marine, we didn't really have that option, so I haven't carried that forward. But mirror neurons are a real thing. So if I see somebody that is enjoying themselves or having a good time, there are triggers in my brain that mirror that feeling. And what that means for us as salespeople, when we pick up the phone, when we're communicating in social media, when we're sending emails, if we're not excited and passionate about that, it's going to be impossible to get our prospects passionate and excited about what we have to sell. And so for us, that means a lot of internal management, self-state management. A lot of salespeople are beginning to learn now. I don't know how it took us so long, but to actually stand up when we're making sales calls so that we can be engaged and move. That comes across in our vocal tone. And because so much of what we do to communicate as salespeople is with our voices, whether it's a virtual setting like this or whether it's a phone call, we have to begin to elicit the type of interest that we express. And we can only do that by being passionate, being excited, knowing that we are interrupting somebody's life, because that's what salespeople do. A lot of sales trainers have said the salespeople unwilling to interrupt somebody has skinny kids. That's the truth. So if I'm interrupting you, it means I have to know as a certainty that whatever you had on your calendar is not as important as the value that I'm here to deliver to you today, whether you buy from me or not. So my job is to help deliver that value in such a way that you learn something that will make your life or business better, whether you end up being a client, whether we end up doing business now or ever.
Brilliant. It's so funny you talk about the standing up thing. I've been teaching that for years and years. In fact, I bought a stand-up desk. I'm standing up right now because I feel better and I gesture more naturally. And we want our conversations to be natural. And in fact, I really learned this from a guy. Before I opened my own consultancy, I worked for a company that was a sales training company run by a gentleman named Steven Schiffman, a real expert in the world of selling, wrote like 42 books. And on my first interview with him, I walked into this very large office, and to the side, he had a podium, like a speaker like you or I would have on a stage. I actually don't like podiums. I like to wander around, but he had a podium in his office. And after a little bit of conversation, I said, what's the podium about, Steve? And he goes, oh, what do you think? I said, well, you're a professional speaker. You practice speaking in your office. He goes, nope. I said, okay, in that case, I'm really clueless. And he said, walk over to it. And I got up and walked over. There was a telephone on the podium. And I said, Steve, why do you have a telephone on a podium? Because that's where I make my calls. When you stand up, you're more energetic, you're more enthusiastic. And of course, you and I both know energy and enthusiasm are contagious and you want to sound better. Plus, if anybody's ever taking singing lessons, you know that when you're singing, you don't breathe from your chest, you breathe from your diaphragm, which is lower. And when you sit, your diaphragm is crunched. When you stand, your diaphragm naturally expands and you simply sound better. It's why when I'm doing a full day of training, and I would assume you do the similar things when you're consulting, I stand all day. Now, I'd rather be sitting, except I'm going to save my voice because my voice sounds better when I'm standing. And you're naturally doing the things that you do when you sound enthusiastic. And I'm with you 1,000,000%. So, what is a rallying cry, and how can salespeople rally their prospects?
So we have to start by rallying our companies first, and then we can rally our prospects. And this really goes back to having systems so that we can further systemize them. Now, that sounds a little weird, so let me dive a little deeper into it. Because of the work that I do is to help companies stand up sales systems. Often people have things that they think are systems, but are actually just processes that are used randomly, okay? And so if we're going to iterate our systems, if we're going to make them better, if we're going to adapt our sales processes to a world of COVID-19 and virtual selling, we have to have something to adapt. And that means we have to at least define what it is we're here to do, how we go about doing it, and best practices as much as we can dive into them, in an initial setting or conversation. Once we have that, now if the world changes or if we learn something that we can use to improve it, we've got something to improve. Otherwise, we're right back where we started, which is using hope. Where, hey, everybody, try to use this Zoom thing because our travel budgets got canceled. We can't get on airplanes to visit clients anymore. Try to figure it out. And that's what a lot of salespeople were in the situation of having to do about April of this year in 2020. So instead, it's to say, okay, if we have systems, here's our sales process, here's the cadence of outreach, here's what our pipelines look like, here's our campaigns. How do we adapt those for a world that's changing? And once we get that rallying cry together on our own team, on our sales team, whether we're a company of one or a company of 1,000 salespeople, now we can begin to bring that to our prospects and say, all right, we've adapted everything on our end. Let us help you adapt to the new world that we're all living in. And this really comes down to making sure that we are taking the time to assess each week what's working, what's not, in all of our sales, our conversations, our meetings, and our outreach, so that the next time we are in front of a prospect, and especially the next time we're servicing a client, we know that they're having the best experience that anybody has ever had with our company. Because I can reach back in my own company and say, beginning this time last year, we've improved more than 500 different elements of how we go to market, how we sell, and how we deliver our product and service. So the next client that I get is going to learn much more than the client did last year. And it's going to continue like that for the rest of my career, because this is a process that's never going to end for me. So that rallying cry for clients is, hey, if I do business with Shawns Company, it's going to be the best experience anybody's ever had, because it gets better every single week.
Always dedicated to exceeding their expectations and growing. It's that difference that most business people and most salespeople never do between working in your business and working on your business. Most of us simply never invest the time. And I'm not talking about spending time. I'm talking about investing the time to think about, what am I doing that's working well? What's not working? How can I do things differently? What can I experiment with? How can I test and measure and see what's working really, as opposed to gut instinct or anecdotal evidence, and then move towards that in a way that brings in more prospects, more clients, more money, and serves more people. And most people, in my opinion, simply never take the time. And it took me paying a very high-priced coach to teach me that lesson. And by the way, when she did, I didn't want to do it. I was like, are you kidding me? You want me to invest an hour every day just with my hands behind my head looking at the ceiling going, what can I do differently? I don't have the time for that. She goes, you don't have the time not to. Mm-hmm. So yeah. By the way, good morning to Steve Kent. Good morning to Don Levine. And Steve says, thank you for your service, Shawn. And I say the same thing. You talk about thinking about change in a new way or a different way, and COVID has certainly caused a lot of change for all of us. How can salespeople think of change in a new way? And do you have any suggestions for actually adapting in this new COVID and post-COVID world, which hopefully it'll be a post-COVID world sometime in the next 6 months to a year?
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I can give you the same advice that I give to executives in Fortune 100 companies, because they're dealing with the same problems, right? This just gets fractaled down to salespeople at this point. So we're still dealing with all of the same problems that we had this time last year. We've layered on top of that a changing world that COVID-19 has forever affected. I don't think we're ever going to get back to sales exactly as they were. These new elements are going to continue with us. And so what most executives have problems dealing with, most salespeople have problems dealing with, is these new changes don't go away. They just start stacking on top of all the things that we have been dealing with, the problems we have in getting in touch with prospects, the problems we have in qualifying, the challenges that we have getting them on the phone, getting them into meetings, ascertaining budget, ascertaining buying windows, all the things that we know we need to do as salespeople. Those challenges haven't gone away, but now COVID is on top of that. So what we need to start doing is figuring out, how do we eliminate as many of the recurring challenges that we face in our day-to-day sales life in all of those areas, so that we can free up the time to innovate. Because if we're trying to just, like we've been putting out fires, we got 30 fires burning at any one time in our sales world. As soon as we get done with you, I'm getting into my CRM. I got fires to put out every single day, prospects that need to hear from me, emails that need to get sent, phone calls that need to get made. That doesn't go away. Now we got COVID. So if I didn't have a way to make sure that I was keeping all of that outside of my head, that it was systemized and running processes even while I slept, then I wouldn't have the bandwidth to deal with getting on virtual platforms, to deal with integrating StreamYard into my outreach with clients, all the things that we now need to do in this new world. So for all the salespeople out there, I'd say, before we start diving into how do we add additional layers of challenges on top of what we're already dealing with, identify the top 5 problems that you have today in your existing sales processes and the results that you need to achieve. Figure out what you can begin doing to take that out of your head, put it into a system or a process, whether that lives in your CRM or on an Excel spreadsheet. Now that's happened, you can adapt those to this changing world. Because my work, until I really started teaching organizations about improving sales, was in change management. So these large companies would bring me in to help them develop systems to pivot for market changes that they couldn't even see coming. And I'm not an expert in retail. I'm not an expert in distribution. What I'm an expert in is helping us free up the bandwidth so that we can use the decades of experience those executives have in their heads to solve the problems in distribution and in retail. But if they're always putting out fires, that bandwidth doesn't exist. If as salespeople, we're always trying to just, keep one step ahead of this constant rat race that we're on, hey, COVID's not going to do anything positive for us. And the next change that's inexorably coming in 2021 that we can't even see, we're just going to put that on top. This, massive problem sandwich begins to stack if we don't begin to solve things today.
Yeah, I've been getting that same question a lot. Jeff, how do I adapt to, not meeting people face to face? And I think there's some simple things to keep in mind, as well as, I'm always a fan of trying to turn lemons into lemonade, putting a positive spin on it. And you could certainly say that one positive is I'm saving a crap load of time by not getting on planes and driving to people's places. Of course, the disadvantages, I don't get to shake somebody's hand. I can't read their body language. It's not as personal. But the first thing I've been telling people is don't shortcut your sales process. Whatever you would have done in person, still do that same thing. You still need to establish rapport. You still need to ask questions. You need to go through the same process that you would in person over like a Zoom call like this or using any other video conferencing. And some of the simple things that I think are crucial is just like you have good lighting. You have to have good lighting. You want people to see you. You want to have an external microphone probably so people can hear you, because if they can't see you and they can't hear you, you're going to have a very hard time establishing rapport and asking questions and doing all that other stuff. So focus on the little stuff, and some of the big stuff will take care of itself. Now, I know you're shortly about to publish a new book called Bulletproof Selling. What is Bulletproof Selling, and what can we learn from that?
So what I saw with these teams that really impressed me, these military teams I was able to embed with and travel and fight alongside, and you probably have seen this if you've ever seen a military-themed action movie, where a team of Army Rangers or Special Forces or U.S. Marines will go into a house and they look like they're a single entity, and that they're constantly moving. They're looking around corners, they're checking stairwells, but they do it in a way that almost looks choreographed, like they've been training in that building for years. Well, as I saw these teams do this in cities like Fallujah and Ramadi and Baghdad, I realized they'd never been in these houses before, but yet that's the way they were moving, like they'd lived in them for years. And I realized that it wasn't because they were superhuman, but the abilities that they had in order to constantly move as a unit, to always cover their angles, that actually made them bulletproof. And we realized that salespeople that were practicing and training and iterating in the same way that these high-performing teams were, they were able to be bulletproof in their sales processes as well, because they were not just going into things blind. No U.S. Marine would walk up to an occupied building and knock on the door and ask if every bad guy wanted to come out and surrender. That just doesn't happen. Instead, they say, all right, what did we learn the past 200 years of doing this that we can bring to bear today at this particular moment with this next prospect, at this next sales call, that we can ensure success in? And it isn't because they're superhuman that they're bulletproof. It's because they bring those systems, those processes, and that continual iteration of what they know to bear at every new situation. So that's what we're rolling out for salespeople in 2021.
So it's really putting in the time and the effort, doing the practicing, the role playing for salespeople. And by the way, I've watched a million of those movies. I love those. And I know they don't knock on the door. They're putting some C4 on there and somebody's kicking the door in, and then the first guy runs in and there's a lot of clear. I mean, I love that stuff. And it truly does look choreographed. And my experience is that so many salespeople simply don't take the time to invest in their own success. Most studies show that the typical salesperson doesn't read a sales book once a year, just doesn't do it, won't go to a seminar unless their company pays for it. The stunning thing to me is there's so much free material out there available. You go to YouTube and just type in sales. There's a million guys just like you and me giving great advice. There's a lot of people giving bad advice too, but there's some really well-known experts who are giving away information for free. I know I'm constantly putting videos on LinkedIn. I'm giving away the stuff that I sell to corporations and coaching clients for free. So it's really, you got to invest in yourself. And I know Marines and all the arms, they go through a lot of training to make that look like it's a dance. And so they are risking themselves as little as possible. So I get it now with Bulletproof Selling. That's great. What have you found about working on teams that helps people be more successful in general? Because I know a lot of salespeople, they're lone wolves.
Oh yeah. And you to your point with training. So all the great stuff that you're putting out each week, if I were to follow just this session alone, I might come up with 100 things that I need to start doing. Now, 100 things is overwhelming, and and just from an hour, right? If I went back through all of your sessions, I'd have thousands of things that you charge organizations for that you give away for free. So the question that all salespeople have and all vice presidents of sales have is, hey, if I'm investing in my people or they're investing in themselves, are they hoping that they remember to use this stuff in the future? And it all goes back to using hope as a strategy again. So if we don't take the time to map out our pipeline, get it outside of our heads, if we don't take the time to map out our buying stages, our deal stages, where we move a prospect through in order to become a client, if we don't take the time to map out our campaigns, I might hear something from you, Jeff, or from me that is like, hey, that's exactly what I need to be doing. But if we don't take the time to figure out where does that slot in and build that into something that's outside of our heads, it'll be doubtful that we remember to use it in the future. And so I'd say that, it's a billion-dollar industry, the entire sales training industry, if it's not multiple billions of dollars worth of revenue flowing through there. But how many organizations are getting ROI out of that? That's a tough question. To your point, hey, we have to continue to practice this stuff. We have to check it. We have to manage it. We have to measure it. Well, if I can't take what you're giving me and slot it somewhere that is going to trigger in front of me whenever I'm next in front of that prospect or getting ready for that sales call, it's a slim chance, if any, I'm going to remember it. And so that's what we found to be most successful for teams, is to be able to map out their process. And when they learn something new, now they know to slot that in between steps 4 and 5, right? So part of your constant improvement as a salesperson is taking what you learn and making sure that it will apply to that next prospect call, to that next negotiation you step into, to that next referral generation that you're trying to get out of that client.
Yeah, and you just mentioned another term that every salesperson consistently needs to keep in mind. Our prospects are sitting and thinking as we're speaking to them, what's my ROI going to be? And if I choose to use Shawn or Jeff or Steve Kent or anybody else, buy their product or buy their service, what am I going to get out of it? Because it goes back to that with them. And if we're not good at expressing that, if we're not being very clear about here's what you'll get out of investing in my widget, then they're not going to figure it out. And you sound like a guy who's probably studied brain science. Brain science says that we mostly go to the negative first. Oh my goodness, if I pay Shawn or Jeff all this money, what if it doesn't work out? And we have to be really good at helping, again, putting our arms around people and letting them know it's all going to be okay. I've done this before, and here's how it's going to work out for you. There's something else I was fascinated by. You talk about the gap between goals and strategy. Can you elaborate a little bit about that? Because I'm a very big, I've actually co-authored a book on setting and achieving goals. But what's the gap? And talk a little bit about that, if you would.
So most strategies we found, whether it's a corporate strategy that includes, operation and marketing and distribution, or whether it's just a sales strategy. So here's, how that strategy applies specifically to my sales team. Very few organizations are taking the time to set even beyond SMART goals. It's great if you have something that is specific, measurable, achievable, reachable, all that great stuff, right? But what we're discovering is that the teams that are ones that are able to pivot midstream, because it's a great saying that no plan survives contact with the enemy, or a prospect for that matter. And prospects aren't our enemies, but they're wily creatures, those prospects, and they'll take a great plan and just trash it because they're not operating by our plan. They're operating by their plan. So we have to be able to pivot midstream in our goals and in our strategy. So what that means is that we have to have goals that are time bound. We have to have goals that have specific people of accountability built within them. So even if, everybody in the division is responsible for this, one person really has to own success or failure. And that might be the VP of sales. It might be the team leader or the regional manager. Somebody has to own it. And that way, as a leader, if I'm the CEO of the organization or the VP of business development, I can go down to that one person and say, where are we at in that goal? Because the strategy was passed down. We've translated into something that's achievable, time bound. It's got a specific person of accountability for you. And probably, and this is the biggest piece that most teams miss in goal setting and in achieving goals, they miss a piece on the goal that says, how will we know this has been done? So many sales teams and so many individual salespeople will hit goal mid-quarter, or they'll get done early, or they'll produce that report way ahead of time. And that is an asset that could be leveraged inside the company that just sits there collecting dust. So if I hit goal, mid-quarter, I might take off to the beach the rest of the time because I'm down here in sunny Florida, but I could be producing a lot more for my organization. I could be giving something back to my sales team and helping mentor my junior salespeople. But yet so many salespeople don't do that because there is no, how do we know this has been done? It's the goal's achieved. And until we get back together for planning again next year or next quarter, there's this big gap of performance. So understanding that we need to build into every goal, every process, every achievable thing that we do, how will we know this has been done? Am I going to send an email to somebody? Am I going to share it at the weekly team meeting? Am I going to post that in the company report? How do we know? And if we really define that, it closes the loop on so many performance issues, because now it frees up these resources to be used, or it frees up this human capital that we have just sitting there, underperforming, into ways that allow us to grow our companies and grow our revenue.
Yeah, and we need to be tracking that consistently, and we shouldn't be waiting to figure out at the end of the year, how are we doing? I think we both know that in the speaking business that January and February are a great time because companies like to bring in guys like us to kind of pump up the team for the year and give them skills and strategies that they can use. But I don't know if you do one-on-one coaching, but I do a lot of that. Now, I get very busy at this time of year with I almost said something really negative, but people who have not been as intelligent as they could have been, and the call is, Jeff, it's just before Thanksgiving, and I just realized I'm not going to hit my goal for the end of the year, and I've only got 6 more weeks. What the hell do I do? You know what you should have done? You should have known that at the end of January or February. You can't wait till Thanksgiving and go, oh my God, I'm only 2/3 of the way to quota. What am I going to do? It's too late. Unless you're in an incredibly short sales cycle, a highly transactional sale, you're already selling into January and February. I have
absolutely.
Yeah, for training purposes, I have an 8-week sales cycle. Now, sometimes I close deals in one sitting, very rare. I closed one, it took 4.5 years. That's very rare too, but my average is 8 weeks. Well, that means anybody I start talking to now about working with their company to do training, that's the deal for January.
Exactly.
And the prospecting that I'm doing now is for February and March and April. So we cannot wait till the last minute and go, oh no, it's like, oh no, I gained 100 pounds. How am I going to lose it by spring? Well,
yeah, and companies, they ask me to come in and assess this because that's the same thing. We're way behind goal. It's getting close to the end of the year. What do we do about it? There are 2 questions I ask them that cause everybody in the room to scratch their heads. The first one is, can you give me the goal, the exact goal and the exact wording that you gave to your people when this goal was issued? And very few can do it. The ones that can reach back into some email or some document that says, here's what you're supposed to achieve by the end of 2021 or 2020, whatever the year might be. I say, great, that's question 1 out of the way, if you can provide it. Second question, this is the one that always trips people up. Give me the plan that you gave to your people to achieve that goal. And most everybody is, they're going to give a plan that sounds something like, well, we told them to go out and sell. Really?
Go get them.
Yeah, exactly. It's January. Go make number. You got 12 months to do it. Oh, yeah, that's a recipe for failure. What I want to see, because if we can't look at a plan to change, then we're just going to be operating, again, based on hope or based on let's just go out there and do our best. Well, in the teams that I studied, doing your best wasn't good enough because it meant a lot of people weren't making it home to their families. And so what they had to realize was if we don't have a plan that we're following, and it might look like down to daily cadence, here's our year-long pipeline strategy. Here's our quarterly strategy. Here's how many accounts we expect to move through these buying stages. Here's how many people we have to reach out to do that. And here are the methods we're using to reach out to them. If you can't break your sales plan down to that granular level with me, then we have to create it. Because otherwise, we're never going to be able to assess last year's results, whether it was a success or a failure, and figure out how do we make them better. It's just going to be, hey, let's go out and try again. That's not good enough for me, and it shouldn't be good enough for you either.
No, absolutely not. And you keep using words that I love. That word plan is so important. When I take on a new coaching client, the first thing we always do is we agree on what's their goal. And it's not me telling them their goal, it's whatever goal they're committed to. And I love that word commitment because I don't care about what people want or hope for or dream about or wish. I only care about what you're committed to because that's what moves everything. But the second thing I have them do is write out your business plan. And it's not a plan that you're going to take to a bank and get a loan, but let's say it's the beginning of the year. Between January 1 and December 31, 2021, if you're committed to earning $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, well, there's a bunch of stuff that has to happen between January 1 and December 31 in order to make that happen. And you certainly can't wait till November to make that stuff happen. And it should be broken down, like you talked about baby eyes or beginner's eyes, into baby steps. I always suggest that it's hard to do big things. It's hard to lose 100 pounds, but it's easy to lose 3. I can do that by Sunday. That's not a problem. So we want to actually write out our plan, put it into chronological order, break everything into its smallest component parts. And then to me, one of the most important things, and as a performance expert, I hope you'll agree, is you got to get going. It's hard to get going. It's easier to keep going, but it's hard to get going. Most goal-setting experts seem to agree that once you set a goal, if you don't take action towards it within 72 hours, you probably never will. Not with my clients. It's like, what can you do right now while we're on this Zoom call that'll just get you going? The example I always love to use, Shawn, is going to the gym. You decide this year I'm going to get in shape. Well, not you, because I'm sure you're in great shape, but this year I'm getting in shape. I got my
workout in today, man. It's already done.
I save my bike ride for the end of the day, but it will get done. But you decide to join a gym at the end. You set a New Year's resolution, not a goal, but a New Year's resolution, which is kind of a hope. And you're going to join a gym, and you wake up on January 2nd, and it's like, oh, Jesus Christmas. You know what? Maybe I should go tomorrow. And you come up with 8 million excuses, and getting out of bed is impossible. And finding your sneakers is impossible. But somehow you drag your rear end out of bed and you get to the gym and everything hurts. And you can't believe you decided to do this. And the second day it's hard. The third day it's hard. Maybe that first month is hard, but after a while it becomes easier and easier. You just got to force yourself to get going, get into act. Like Nike says, just do it.
Yeah. And so I'm happy to give some insight into how to get that done as a salesperson.
Please do.
So the biggest problem that I had first when I started without a CRM was, who do I reach out to? How does that happen? Through what communication channel does it happen? And how many times? Well, once we began developing systems, and then this is something that, again, we pass on to organizations. Once you have that mapped out into cadences, campaigns, and a campaign isn't just like blasting stuff through Infusionsoft and hoping for a 0.005% conversion. It's picking up the phone, it's sending LinkedIn messages that are customized, even using direct mail across every communication channel you can. But once that happens, now I get into my CRM each day and I've got maybe, 150 things that I could be doing across 400, 500 plus qualified prospects. That gets overwhelming too. So what's the thing that I can do to start at right now? So what I began doing, and this is something that salespeople can begin doing if you have a CRM, is map out the type of tasks that are being brought in front of you each day across all of your cadences and outreach. And the way that I do that is I prioritize what are the deals that are closest to closing at the end of my pipeline. Create a tag for the tasks that are involved across those accounts. And it might be, priority, it might be close to close, whatever that looks like for you. The next one might be the type of task that you would need to be engaged in across every other account. So these are the accounts that are just in play, crossing your pipeline stages. That might look like, here are all the phone calls I need to make today. So the task shows up as a phone call, and it might cross, again, 5 or 6 different buying stages across hundreds of prospects. But that way I can see all my phone calls at one point, all my emails. I want to see all those at one point. And that way I can take action today on everything that's closest to closing. This is like Stephen Covey's urgent and important quadrant. And then I can get into my call block. Where are all the phone calls? I want to see all those at once. I want to bang them out. Bang, 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 bang. Where are all my emails? I can handle those at lunch. I can handle them in the evening when I'm catching up on my Netflix. I want to knock all those out, right? Where are all the administrative tasks? And so by helping kind of categorize or prioritize your own sales activity, you can take action on things when you might have hundreds of things you could be doing. Let's knock out what are the most important 5 things I could be doing right now, and then the next 5, and the next 5. Phone calls, emails, that kind of a thing. That really allowed me to regain sanity, and the clients that we're using this with, it allows them to say, all right, I don't have to cross function anymore. You talk about brain science, moving from LinkedIn to a phone call to an email and having to repeat that process again and again and again. Whoa, that's exhausting just thinking about it. So I'm sure you train your companies as well. Let's take your type of tasks, let's block that, get those done, and then move into the next type of task, next type of task.
Yeah, well, one of the things that consistently blows my mind is, when I'm observing a coaching client, or whether it's a private coaching client or a company brings me and says, hey, Jeff, we got 300 salespeople, but these 10, there's something going on. I'll look at somebody and go, okay, prospecting time, great. What are you going to do? And they sit down, and now they're doing 20 minutes of research, and then they make a call. Then they do 20 more minutes of research, and I'm like, are you kidding me? First of all, this is prime selling time. You don't do your research during prime selling time. Do that at night. Do that on the weekends when you can't be speaking. Look, you can't be calling prospects at 10 o'clock at night unless you're trying to sell services to topless bars. And I don't even know if those are open anymore. But do the stuff that you can do during the day, like reach out to prospects. You can send emails anytime. I've left voicemails at 2 a.m. I kid you not. I've left them on Saturday mornings. But what I can't do is actually engage with prospects on the weekend or at night. So be intelligent about the use of your time and be committed, because we salespeople tend to believe we've got plenty of time. There's always tomorrow. I don't know about that. I hope there's always a tomorrow, but the one thing I tell people quite often is you can almost always get your health back if you lose it. Almost. Mm-hmm. You can almost always definitely make more money, but you can't get back time. Once you've lost that 10 minutes or the day, it's shot. And I'm a big fan of taking breaks so that you can rejuvenate, whether it's a 10-minute break during the day just because you need to clear your head, or a vacation. But when you're working, work with focus and velocity. Those are 2 words I use a lot. You got to focus on one thing at a time and work as fast as you can, because the more stuff you can get done in any time period, the more chances you have of closing some people who are choosing to become your customers and moving on to others. And the other thing I find, Shawn, quite often is Salespeople waste a lot of time chasing prospects that have no intention of doing business with them. You mentioned pipeline management, and I think it's crucial. You have to have a way of understanding who's really interested in working with me, what deals are going to bring the most value and are closest to closing, and start focusing on them as opposed to treating every prospect equally. I find that to be a huge problem.
Absolutely.
Is there something that we can do? Let's say somebody's actually fortunate enough to have a sales meeting in these crazy times and they get an interested prospect. Is there something that we can do after a sales meeting to ensure that we replicate wins and avoid repeating mistakes?
Absolutely. We actually do things before, so we teach clients this as well. There's something that happens before a sales meeting to get you prepped. We call that a pre-sales meeting brief. There's a whole process we use, of course, that we advocate during the sales meeting. And, that could be a whole nother one of these sessions in and of itself. And then there's the debrief that we do after the sales meeting. And so the reason that the debrief is so important is it happens right after the meeting. So whether that's, this is 2019 terms, you get back in your car from meeting with the client, or you hop off of that, phone call. And then these are meetings with qualified buyers. You're not just ascertaining need, you're talking to them about creating a sale, which that looks to you like issuing a proposal, creating an invoice, whatever that looks like, right? That's this type of call. After the meeting, it's to go through a very simple checklist. And we're giving this checklist away in the book that we're releasing in 2021. You can adapt it to your own industry, but it's a checklist to say, did we do the things that we know need to happen in order for this to be successful? Did we qualify this decision maker? Did we get a budget range? Did we find out, are they in their buying window? Did we talk to them about what value they need to see at the tail end of this, what ROI they need to see? Did we connect with them on LinkedIn? Did we do all the things that we've learned over every sales meeting we've ever had to know that we've done everything? We stacked the deck as well as we can for this thing to go to proposal. Or if it couldn't happen today, did we get that next calendar meeting on the calendar, right? Not just, I'll reach back to you if I'm interested, but no, we're getting back together on January 3rd at 2 p.m. Eastern. Did all of those things happen? And so as part of that process, it's a question. This is one of our checklist items that generates improvement inside of a sales team. What did we learn from this meeting that we wish we would have known going in? That might have looked like an objection that you couldn't overcome because you've never heard it before. It might look like you forgot to bring something to the sales meeting that the client asked for. It might look like a technical error. You lost internet in the middle of a virtual meeting, right? Anything that happened that you say, if we'd have known that going in, we probably could have done a better job. And it may be something that the client asked about. Can you guys offer this in the color red? I don't know, can we? But to get answers to those questions. And that way you can build those into your future sales conversations, into your discovery questions, into your outreach that happens in order to generate future sales meetings. This is a great way to help overcome objections before they ever even cross a client's lips. Say, we know you might have a question around this. We provided this to answer it. That comes out of those post-sales meeting debriefs.
Yeah, I call that an every time objection, something that comes up regularly. You might as well bring it up before they do because they're going to do it anyways.
Right.
And we always want to uncover objections before we ask people to buy. That's not the way most people are taught. That's not the way most trainers teach people. It's you go through the process, you ask for the close, and then you deal with objections and rebuttals. Why would I want to fight an uphill battle like that? I want to uncover all the objections before I ask you to do business with me so that I'm not fighting an uphill battle. I was married for 10 years. I don't need to fight any more uphill battles. And the reverse of what you said is also true. A part of pre-meeting planning has got to be thinking about, what do I want to get out of this meeting? The thing I teach people is to ask themselves this question. What information do I need to get today in order to consider this sales call successful? Well, when you actually stop and invest the time to think about that, you now know what questions you have to ask. And to me, questions are the key to selling. And the other thing that first of all, I love that you systematize it. Clearly, you're very big on systems. I love that checklist, and I can't wait to read your book. Do you know when it's coming out?
It'll be January. Yeah, it should be available on Amazon and wherever digital and hard copy books are sold online.
Can't wait. I'll be buying it for sure. I'll be buying it for sure. But I love the idea of a checklist. And what I personally do, and I'm going to use that same 2019 term, when I would get back in my car before I'd start the engine, unless it was freezing cold out, I'd start thinking about what went really well. What did I do that went really well? And what could I have improved upon? And if we're honest with ourselves, I don't care how, look, in about 6 more months, I'll have been in sales 48 years. I've got a ton of experience, but there's always something that you could have done a little bit better, something that you could have tried differently, something that you go, why did I say that? And it's hard to catch in the moment, but when you actually invest the time, this is more of working on your business, to think about what could I do differently? What could I have done better? Hopefully the next time you are better prepared to go into battle, to use your term.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then to your point about what do I need out of this next call to consider it a success, we actually refer to those as micro objectives. So all the teams that I studied, it wasn't just clear the house. It was clear the house, bring out a high value, prisoner, for instance, and also you make sure you bring all your team members back alive. So it wasn't just one thing they were shooting for. In the salesperson's case, the sale. So in micro objectives, they can be broken down depending on where someone is in your buying cycle, so that with every call, with every inbound response, you can move that account further toward the sale. And so sometimes that might just be like, who's the decision maker at your company? There's a lot of ways to ask that. Might be qualifying for budget. It might be qualifying for need. It might be learning something else that will then help you down the road if a sale can't be made today, to better prep yourself for success. So every point of outreach where you get a human on the phone can lead you closer to a sale if you know what objective you're trying to strive for.
That's great. And if I could just give a piece of advice to everybody who watches this, whether you're watching live with me and Shawn right now, or you watch it on the replay, please do not ask people, are you the decision maker?
That's a terrible idea.
Oh my God, what a horrible question. Absolutely, you want to find out who the decision maker is, but ask a better question. And the way I teach salespeople to ask it is, the last time your company made a decision like this, how'd you go about it and who was involved?
Right.
Well, if I hear, I gather the information, I made a decision, I know I'm talking to the decision maker. But if they say, well, I gathered information from 10 companies, I narrowed it down to 5, and then I put those 5 in front of the training committee, and they narrowed it down to 3, and they gave that to the senior VP of sales, who took the 3 and made a choice. Well, I need to get in front of the VP of sales. At least I got to get in front of the training committee, or help the person that I'm speaking with to educate the people above them that I could very well be that right choice. But are you the decision maker? Sadly, almost everybody answers that question like this. Yeah, absolutely.
Of course I am.
Of course I'm the decision maker. Yeah. Just one time, Shawn, just one time I would like somebody to say, are you the decision maker? And the other person goes, decision maker? I'm so far from a decision maker, I'm embarrassed for you that you're in my office. I'm so unimportant here. If I was on fire, they wouldn't put me out. Can't believe you're talking to me. But they don't do that. It's crazy. Oh my goodness, I'm looking at the clock. I've got 75 more questions I want to ask you. Here's one last one, because I really want to hear about this. What's the difference between inspiration and motivation?
Ooh, great question. So if you look back to the root of the word inspiration, it actually comes from the Latin in spiritu, right, which is in spirit. So whether you're religious or not, whether you think that there's some kind of a divine force in the universe or universal intelligence, when we talk about being inspired, we're talking about whatever it is that we can't know with our logical conscious minds flowing into our lives and through us. That's what being inspired means. And because I live my life in such a way that, like you said, I can't get my time back. So I need to make sure every moment is lived as fully as it can be. And, got that from a lot of experiences across battlefields around the world. Hey, my life is not going to last forever. I want to make sure I'm doing the right things with it. That comes from a feeling of being inspired to provide value to my clients, to provide value back to the sales community that I get to serve through events like this. Now, the other word that you use, give it to us again.
Motivation.
Motivation. So speaking, some people will say, hey, are you a motivational speaker? No. If you need Tony Robbins, I'm not that guy. Okay. What I help companies do is produce better results. Speaking is just one of the ways that we transmit that value. And so to be motivated, that's a very passing phase in anybody's life. I might get motivated after a good workout, but as soon as the endorphins are gone, I got to figure something else out. So I really advise that people not try to figure out motivation so much as they figure out, what is it that inspires me? It might not be something ephemeral and spiritual. It might be my family. It might be providing them a better quality life. It might be serving my clients. Figure out what it is that inspires you to do what you do, because that's the thing that whether a client tells you to, go suck an egg or buys the largest thing that you have available, you still leave inspired. Carry that with you, and there will be no client objection that you can't at least get over, if not overcome.
That's great. Yeah, I'm often introduced incorrectly as a motivational speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe I'm highly motivating, but my experience is when you help people make more money, they are motivated as heck. And I also believe that true motivation comes from within. And I do a talk on motivation, but I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm with you. So Shawn, do you work with individuals or only organizations?
A little bit of both.
Good.
Most of the individuals that I work with are it's VPs of sales, so one-on-one engagements with them and helping them manage down their teams and create systems. And then, of course, we do a lot of work with organizations around all of their salespeople, making sure that they're building the systems and processes that allow them to pivot, that allow them to become bulletproof, so that they don't have to continue using hope as their sales strategy.
Got it. Well, I'm sharing my screen right now with your Oh, boy, that's way too big. Something happened there.
You gotta back it out.
What did I do here? Hold on. Would you just tell people? There we go.
There it is.
Would you tell people how they can reach you? They're looking at it right now, but how can they reach you if they're interested in engaging you for their company or working one-on-one?
Absolutely. So Shawn at bulletproofselling.systems, not .com, but .systems, because that's what we're offering here. It is a company, but we're really helping people develop systems. That's my personal line. You bypass my assistant, you bypass my gatekeeper with that number. And then, of course, if you're interested in following the great work we're doing, I would advise you first go to Facebook, where we've stood up a Bulletproof Systems page there. Connect with me one-on-one on LinkedIn, and then we're going to be rolling out, much like you, Jeff, continuing to provide value into the community. Podcast coming in 2021, book rollout, all the things that we can do to begin passing these systems on to salespeople so that they can, again, stop using hope and instead become certain about their results.
That's great. So Shawn just told you, if you want to sell him something, here's the way to get past his gatekeeper.
That's the way to do it, yes.
That's brilliant. If only that it was that easy in real life with most of the executives we want to speak with. Shawn Rhodes, thank you so much for generously sharing your brilliance and your time today. I truly appreciate it. You are awesome. I'm so glad that we were introduced. I can't remember who introduced us, but I certainly owe them a great thanks and my gratitude. Please have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and thank you so much for being with us today. And I can't wait to read your book. For the Sales Pro Network, there will be no Facebook Live next week. Hopefully you'll be eating turkey on Thursday with family or Zooming it and recovering on Friday, but we'll do another one 2 weeks from today. And Shawn, if I can ever do anything for you, please let me know. And as I always end each of these, guys, please remember that sales is a game of making things happen. So get out there and make sales happen. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Bye, Shawn.